So welcome to the video. This is part one. Now this was originally a class way back September last year, but I just thought it'd be really nice to share because I know it's August, but it's already starting to feel very autumnal. I'll pop the equipment lists below for you, but you can see some of the cutters and veiners and I'll name them when I actually use them. The first thing we're going to do is make some horse chestnuts, and I absolutely adore them. I'm going to be using Hearty Soft Deluxe today, but I'll also explain how to use in sugar. But the first thing you need to do is to roll a sausage of paste in spruce green to the same height as your veiner. And I'm using the ridge method to roll out, which means I'm pressing in the centre, rolling off to the left, and press back in the centre and roll off to the right. And that leaves this really good little ridge down the centre. Now, as you can see, if you use a narrower rolling pin, it actually rolls quicker. Place your veiner on top, and I'm using the smooth side of the veiner on the paste itself, and I'm just going to use it as a rough template to work out how much I need. So I'm using my PME cutting wheel to do this. You can also use a pin, or you can use a scalpel as well. All I'm doing is I'm leaning ever so slightly inside so that it ends up slightly smaller. And also you can trim off extra as well if you want to. But once you've done that paste, make sure you knead it back into a ball and put it back in the bag, just to keep it nice and soft and pliable for future use as well. You can see the paintbrush handle. You could use that instead if you haven't got any special rolling pins. Now, when you want to lift it up, you need to use something. I just used what's to hand, so I used my cutting wheel, but you can use a little palette knife as well. And we're going to wire this. Now, if you're using Hearty Soft Deluxe, you can use lighter wires, like a 28 gauge for this size. And if you wanted to use flower paste, you'd have to go heavier. So you'd be on around a 24 to 26 gauge wire. A little bit about the veiners I'm using as well. These are Squires Kitchen Horse Chestnut veiners, and they come in a set, so you've got different sizes in there as well, which is perfect. If you want the little striations on the edge, you can also use a pin to do the zigzag effect on there. You can use a Dresden tool to grab the edges, but whatever method you choose to do, you must thin the edges with a ball tool. A really nice large ball tool is very helpful as well. The stainless steel keeps the paste cool, stops it sticking so much. Now, when you're using cold porcelain, you have to roll it like a rolling pin. When you're using flower paste, you can drag it, and always remember half on and half off. And when you're using the ball tool, you can either use that flower pad, and I've got my black teaching one, or you can do it on your hand. Now, if you're using a veiner, I've kept the edges ever so slightly thicker than I want, because what happens is when I put it in the veiner, it's going to get some of the rough edge to it because it's going to thin it out further. It's a good method not to have to do all the little zigzag shapes as well. Press really firmly in every single part of the veiner, and just a little hint, if you're using flower paste, you need to press harder than you do for the Hearty Soft Deluxe or the air drying clays. I'm obviously chatting away while I'm doing it. Now, when you want to release it, can you see how easily that releases? But if it doesn't release, once you've taken one side of the veiner off, put it face down and gently peel it back. So I'm just thinning it down ever so slightly at the bottom because I've noticed that it's not picked up the vein correctly. So any bit that sort of sticks out of the veiner a little bit, you can remove off. And then when you've done it, you just need to give it a little bit of shaping. So you can rest it on your hands and you can lift up the fingers and push down a finger in the centre. Really good way to get a nice shape onto a leaf as well. Always clean up your little bits and pieces though. Just give the little wire a bend in half and hang it upside down. You can just about see it hanging upside down from the polystyrene. And then just get ready to start all over again. Make sure your veiners are clean and you haven't got any bits. Make sure they're still sticking together. Some people have accidentally cut bits off their veiners as well. Be really careful with them and just look after them, and they'll last you for a really long time. Before we go any further, let's do another method. So if you don't want to use the veiner as a template to cut it out, or you don't want to use a cutter, this is another option. So prepare your sausage of paste, and this is going to be the length of your veiner. So whatever size veiner you're using, you just want to make it the same length, and you're still going to be doing that ridge in the center. And you can see I'm almost going at an angle, so it's narrower at the top and the ridge is wider at the bottom. You can also roll away as much of the ridge at the top as you wish. You can initially start it out and check it if you wish. There we go, using the cutting wheel again. Now this is obviously using a slightly smaller size as well. Trim off the excess at the top because we know that's not going to be the right shape, going from what we needed last time. So there's me lifting it up with my palette knife this time, and I'm checking the size in the veiner as well. So you can go ahead and put a wire in there now. So this is a smaller size, so I'm going to use a 30 gauge wire if I'm using the Hearty Soft Deluxe, which is the air drying clay, or I'm going to use a 28 gauge if it's the flour paste or gum paste, whichever you prefer to call it. Apologies, that was off screen. I'm also going to make it ever so slightly bigger. So this is not only making it bigger, it's making it thinner, but with the security of the wire already being inside. Now you can moisten your wire with a little bit of the glue. I'm just going to explain what I'm doing there first. So I'm now putting the shape that is too large back into the veiner. So this is the other method I wanted to show you. So I'm squeezing it together and I'm pulling off all the excess off around the edges. All of those little bits that you've ripped off as well, you can obviously use, so knead them back together and pop them back in a bag. Can you see what I mentioned earlier about removing it easily? You can also use your cutting wheel just to trim off any little bits and pieces that you're not very happy with. So don't worry, you can always neaten as you go. And this will give you a far more natural leaf because you're using that slightly rough edging as well. Another method I'm going to show you is using a groove board and also using, it's actually a Primrose leaf cutter. You can use Magnolia leaf cutters as well, just to give you a random shape if you'd prefer to have a cutter. But can you see older cutters can split? You can join them back together though. A little bit of a soldering iron will help there. Knead your paste back as normal. I've got my veiners, got my cutting wheel, just getting myself ready for you again. Now this is a groove board, this is a cell board. There are lots of different varieties out there. Again, I'm rolling the sausage paste to the length of the leaf that I'm going to use. And what I've made sure I've done is to grease my board. Now, if you're using Hearty Soft Deluxe, you can use a little bit of cold cream. If you're using edibles, then you can use any of your preferred petal bases or Trex or Crisco. I'm still rolling it out, but now the vein is already there. So I lift it out and turn it and cut it out. There are lots of ways of using this board. I'm just showing you a super fast way. As you can see, I press and pull my paste away, and I find that gives me a cleaner cutter when I'm using the Hearty Soft Deluxe. Still check the edge though, it's always worth checking the edge. And as I mentioned, that is an old cutter. It's probably about 25 years old. But it was a Primrose cutter set, the leaf set, and I bent them into a shape. And sometimes when you bend them into shape, they pop. We're going to wire this again, so I've dipped it in a little bit of the Impex high tack glue. Rub the excess off your hands. Don't forget, if you're using flour paste, then you can use it with your regular flour glue, edible glue. You can go any depth you like. Now, 2/3 to 3/4 if you want to support the leaf, or you can just go on the very base of the leaf if you don't feel it needs support. But don't forget, one little touch on that leaf and it will break. Just neatening off that bit. And also, where it's not actually the leaf cutter for the shape we want, I need to shape it back into a horse chestnut leaf. Getting rid of all the bits. Always get rid of the bits. Always check as well that it feels nice and thin. You can pop it on your pad as well and thin it out. Now, as I mentioned, I use the black one when I'm recording just to make it easier for you to see. But the nice white ones are super soft and a lot easier to use as well. And don't forget, can you watch the method now? Rolling it as if it's a cocktail stick is a great method when you're using air drying clays or cold porcelain, because they do tend to drag a little bit. So it's a better method. Turn it over, so the side that was underneath is always better as the top. So I turned it over before I put it into the veiner, and the bottom veiner is recessed and the top veiner is sticking out. So when you press it down, it pushes into the vein for you, and it really is a great veiner, this one. Gently remove it from there, because you don't want it to stick and you don't want to rip that wire out. So this is the method if it's sticky. Now when you're making this, you need 1 large, 2 medium and 2 small. So that gives me lots of opportunities to show you different ways really. So I'm just going to roll out my paste again into that sausage and into the height of the veiner that I'm going to use. Then I tend to sort of pinch it a little bit flatter because it's an awful lot easier to start if you've pinched it a little bit. You can use a rolling pin or you can use your fingers to do this. I'm still going to put the ridge in that we've done all the way through. There's the leaves for the sizing that we're going to be making. Just to sort of give you an idea. It's going to be green stem for the actual leaves and then brown stem for the branch, and it always looks really dramatic then. But as I said, you need 1 large, 2 medium and 2 small. You can add blemishes as well. The oak is what we're also going to be making in this lesson. So you can see the acorn. I've got a few methods of the acorn for you as well. So again, from the middle out to the side, and keep repeating with that in both directions. And I'm going to wire my leaf. So edible glue, or if you're using Hearty Soft Deluxe, air drying clay, cold porcelain, don't forget you can use either a PVA glue or I like the Impex high tack glue, but always rub the excess off first. I always thin out a little bit further before I go any more. And we're going to give a former for the leaf to dry on. Now, you've got all sorts of options, haven't you? You can make former by folding it in half and in half again with the foil, and then actually veining it, which I'll show you a little bit later. You can also use it to just scrunch the foil, and then you can lay your leaf on when you're ready to. So a scrunch in here. I like a nice strong foil as well if I'm going to use it as a leaf support. So look for a nice thick foil. Sometimes it's tricky to pick them up. If I've left it sitting down even for a couple of seconds, I re-roll it again and it wakes the paste up. I'm also thinning it out quite a lot to get it quite nice and fine. I'm checking how thick my paste is at the top and I'm thinning it out. Only very gentle pinches between the fingers, that's all you need. Now when a leaf is resting, it needs to rest in like a V shape. So the central vein is obviously in the centre. So let's get another piece of foil. So obviously I showed you a scrunch support, so let's show you the other type. So you want a piece that is probably twice the height of your leaf and then twice the width. You can use double thickness or you can use quadruple thickness. Now if I'm using a very thin foil, then I'll use 4 thicknesses. There we go, we're just making sure it's nice and flat. And then we're going to put the actual foil in our veiner and vein it. Sounds daft, but it just means when you rest your leaf into that foil afterwards, it'll hold the leaf in the shape that the veiner would. And you can play around with this as much as you like. Can you just about see the veins on the back of it? So you can pop them to one side and you can do as many of those as you wish before you need to start work. So a good idea is as well, if you know they're for oak leaves, grab a container, pop all those foil pieces in the container, stick a label on the top, and then you don't have to make them every single time you do it. So checking the sides again. So use the back smooth side of the veiner facing down, and I'm leaning at an ever so slight angle when I'm using my cutting wheel, leaning inwards. So this means my paste itself is going to be slightly smaller than the veiner shape. You can also make yourself some templates by drawing around and cutting them out in paper, card, or even reusing those margarine tubs and lids to have a permanent veiner. I've tried laminating them as well, but obviously they don't last very long because water can get in between. But a really good way to reuse the plastic, isn't it? And again, pop everything back in a bag so nothing is going to go dry out and horrible for you. You can thin the edges, you can re-roll, you can soften between two pieces of acetate, you can use your ball tool like a rolling pin or like a cocktail stick like we've done before. Again, that's only because I'm using the air drying clay here. And then we're going to vein it, put it into what I call the valley where the veins go down, and then the mountain gets pressed on top. And it's called the mountain because the veins rise up. Really pressing it carefully, absolutely everywhere. You don't need to pick up a veiner to pick up. Can you see it's gone slightly over the edges here and there? You can use that to your advantage. So push it back in if it's gone into a shape that you don't like and revein it. As long as you haven't moved it, it's actually okay. So place face down onto your pad and then you can turn it over. Trim off any excess as we have done, or any neatness that you need. But as I mentioned, I've gone ever so slightly thicker than I would because these veins are very cut in this veiner. So if I'd gone far too thin, it would have just split all the way through. So let's make another leaf just to sort of get that technique in there. But don't forget, you can skip forward if you want to go on to the oak section. But it's really good to repeat it. And as I mentioned, you need 1 large, 2 medium and 2 small. So therefore you get to repeat all these methods. I do like using the ridge method, as you can see, because I do find that it gives me a really nice neat edge to my leaf. It doesn't make it too thick. And the ridge in the center stops your wire from protruding, especially if you've got a really strong veiner, it can settle it in nicely. When you cut your wires, cut them at an angle as well, because that little angle will give you a needle sharp point, which makes it much easier to insert the wire into the leaf itself. And too much glue is a bad thing. So I mentioned wiping the glue off on your hands. That makes it an awful lot better because you know that there's not going to be too much glue and it's not going to be sliding around for you. Here I'm showing you how to use a cutter when your wire is already in your leaf. It's something that some people do. They automatically wire the piece of paste they're working on and then suddenly realise, oh no, I never put the wire in. All you need to be aware is that the very base of when you have inserted the wire in, with the base of the cutter shape will need trimming again, because the cutter doesn't work because it can't touch the table. So unless you've got a cutter with a split where you can have the split exactly where you want the wire to be, which is not that common, is it? So all you need to do is use it as if you would normally use the cutter and just neaten the base. So thinning off those edges again, use the ball tool like a rolling pin. That's the ball tool by Decofee, I believe. So it's just a really nice shape. It's very heavy, so it's good. It's a good feel in your hand. You don't feel like you're going to drop it. It's there. Don't be afraid to thin it again if you feel you didn't quite thin it down enough the first time. And if your veiners start to get sticky, you can use a little bit of corn flour or cornstarch in a corn flour puff to make it a lot easier. Pressing firmly on the double-sided veiner. So I'm just going to speed up this section just so you can have another little look. It's a good little refresher while I tell you things. We're going to be making one branch of horse chestnut leaves just in this video. Obviously you can make as many as you wish with as many leaves on as you like, but the leaves grow in groupings. So each grouping, as I've mentioned, is 1 large, 2 medium and 2 small. And I'm going to be doing 2 of those groupings. Now you could choose to make them slightly smaller for one set of leaves than the other, or you can make the 2 leaf groups exactly the same size. So you can play with some templates. When it gets to the right time of the year, if you've got any horse chestnut nearby, of course you can go and make exact leaf templates. You can make yourself a little V shape or use a heart shape cutter, the base of the cutter, the base of the heart shape, the base of a teardrop, base of a leaf, as long as it's pointed, will be great for cutting out little notches out of the leaf edge for you. Now, what you're going to need to do is to leave them dry. If it needs a lot more support, I showed you the different methods of the supports, either a scrunched bit of foil, or you can use the folded up and veined piece of foil, or you can hang them upside down from the foil, from the polystyrene dummy as well. Just don't forget, bend the wire right at the top of the leaf, just underneath the leaf itself, and completely bend it right over so it hangs upside down. If you hang that leaf sideways, it's still going to flop on you. All right, so you can adjust them as they're drying as well. And the beauty of using the Hearty Soft Deluxe, the air drying clay, you can even soften it back up with a hairdryer to adjust it as well, which is absolutely perfect. So let's talk drying times. Now, if you're going to be using flour paste, depending on the weather, if it's really cold and damp or if it's really hot and humid, it's going to take slightly longer to dry. So you can allow yourself overnight if you wish, or if it's drying really nice and quickly because the weather is warm but it's not too damp, then you can leave it for about 4 hours or until you feel when you pick up that wire the leaf is not trying to bend on you. With Hearty Soft Deluxe, it does work dry faster than the flour paste, so that's another bonus. And we do use Hearty Soft Deluxe quite a lot in my classes, along with other cold porcelains, because it's nice to practice in something that lasts forever. It's really good, isn't it? So leave them drying in a cool place, not freezing cold, so not in the fridge, not in the cellar, and also not too hot, so not in a window, not in an attic, and not right by the window. You just want a standard room temperature, and that's absolutely perfect for you to be able to leave them dry. And then when you're ready, you'll go back and colour them, but that's going to be in another lesson. So there we go. So I hope this little fast forward was also helpful for you. I've literally made 10 leaves altogether, so that's all you need to do if you're following along. An oak tree is my absolute favourite. It's so different in the seasons. You've got the beautiful pale green, vivid green spring leaves. You've got the rich dark green leaves in the height of summer. Then you get the green acorns starting, and then as the autumn comes, these turn to a gorgeous array of colours. And the leaves have so much colours as well. So instead of doing some green leaves in this one, we're going to use the Hearty Soft Deluxe and air drying clay, starting from white, and we're going to colour it up ourselves. So I'm going to be using fractal colours to do this, but you can use any brand of colours that you like, whether it's Sugar Flare or Rainbow Dust or Squires Kitchen, Magic Colours. There are some beautiful ranges of colours out there, so use what comes to hand really. The main thing you need to consider though is you need your paste to be soft and moist as well. So if you feel that your paste is a little bit dry, roll your paste into a ball, knead it up, dip the very tip into water and knead it again, and that'll moisten it up for you. So you're going to have a little bit of the lemon yellow there. Don't forget they've got the creams, they've got the oranges, the browns, whatever ranges you want to use really. But if you don't want it to be too pretty a yellow, a little pinch of the brown will really change that up for you. Any terracotta or that sort of range of colours would work really well. And you could even start from white, but I always find even a cream base makes it a lot easier to accept all the colours. If you put your colour into the very centre of your ball of paste when you're kneading it, it doesn't just splurge out all over the table. However, cold porcelains and air drying clays, I found are a lot harder to colour. They need a lot more colour in their paste. And not only that, they do splurge an awful lot easier than flower paste colours do. So you can choose to make this in flower paste or gum paste. And as you can see, I've got an array of cutters and veiners at the top, and you can just catch a sneak peek of the horse chestnut leaves that we'd already made previously as well. So I've got some orchard oak leaf cutters, I've got a Sugar City leaf veiner, and I've got the Squires Kitchen leaf veiner. So you can have a little think really which is suitable for you. It's just, there is no wrong answer, you know, there's loads of ranges out there. Whenever you've coloured your paste though, you do have to store it and seal it. So store it in a sandwich bag, in containers. And in the summer when it's really hot, you can double bag it. So before you double bag it, put it in one bag, wrap a baby wipe or a wet cloth around the first bag, and then put it in the second bag. And that'll stop it drying out in the summer. Or if you've got to leave it for a little bit longer than you would do. But you can always bring the paste back with a bit of water anyway, unless it's gone too far. Once it's dry, it's dry. If you're using certain cold porcelains, you can bring them back a lot longer. But the air drying clay, it doesn't come back when it's completely dry, you know, not like polymer clays and cold porcelains. So I'm just going to show you some moulds that I've got. So there are Sugar City fruit and nut moulds, and they've got a lovely mixture of strawberries and larch cones, acorns. They've also got hazelnuts, all sorts of bits and pieces in those ones. And the green one is one I've made myself, and that's the acorn cap. So that was using the Silly Putty from Silly Creations, and it's a two-part mixture. And you mix equal quantities together, and then you very, very quickly form your mould. And if you need to hurry it up, you can refrigerate it as well. But I tend to leave mine overnight. But one summer I made a mould of the back of an acorn cap. I can also show you how to do it without any mould as well, but this cap is really great. So if they're readily accessible for you, these plants, then you can go out and you can make your own mould. And if you haven't got any special silicone to make the mould with, did you know you can also use a lump of your flower paste or your air drying clay? All you need to do is to dust the back of your acorn before you pop it in. Do you see that large posy pick there? So that is using a method that I was taught by the wonderful Janet Side when I went to Neathport Talbot College. And I thought it was a fantastic method of making a super easy acorn. Don't know if you can see it there. It really is a lovely little mould to use. I obviously had to cut off the stem that the acorn cap was growing to the branch with in order to be able to make my mould. But I left a little bit of it because I found that was an awful lot better. All of these moulds are going to need treating with corn flour if you're using edibles. And you can also use baby powder if you work in cold porcelains. But you must make sure you're not overloading your mould, because if you put way too much into the mould, you're just going to have this huge excess that you've got to cut out. And when you're cutting it off, it distorts the shape of the original piece you're making in the first place. Where wires are concerned, if you're using the Hearty Soft Deluxe, it's a lighter wire is required. And if you're using a flower paste, then it'll be a stronger wire, like maybe a 24 or a 26. Did you know that if you want a strong wire but you don't want it to be hard to bend, you could tape together, say, two 26s or two 28s, and then if you tape it with dark brown florist tape, half width is the very maximum thickness you want to go to, and then bend a hook in the end. It's a lot easier. So can you see the amount of paste that I've got? It's got to be slightly, only slightly narrower than the end of the posy pick that you've got. And you want to make it nice and soft because that's going to actually become the top of your acorn. Yeah, I'm very, very gently checking it. And now I'm going to push it on to the end. Cut the excess off so you can decide how deep the cap is going to be. and you're just softening the paste all the time. So you're also keeping that paste moving so it doesn't dry out too much. If the paste stops being moved, then it just dries out. Good old nail brush for texture. So you don't need any fancy molds really, because this really does give you a good texture. You can also snip with scissors. You can also use tweezers, but I find the nail brush looks the most normal. Gently pull those sides in as well. So when you've pulled the sides in of the cup against the acorn itself, it looks better. And I'm pinching ever so slightly around the top to make a little point. And you can also use a number 2 nozzle, which you pull around that point to make the little circle that you sometimes see at the top of them as well. You can use a Sugar City fruit and nut mould as well to make the acorns, and watch how easily this releases from there now. But as you saw, it's so fast with a posy pick. By the time I remember about it, I never actually go to the cupboard to get the mould out. But it is super fast. So I'm going to show you how to use the number 2 nozzle just to go around the tip of that point. Be very, very gentle to get into the centre, but it really does give a nice finish and make it look more appropriate as well. So you don't really need a lot to make an acorn, do you? Which is really great. So when you want to glue it, we will be using some glue. I've got the Impex high tack glue there. I do keep my lid on. I don't ever snip the cap as well. So you can also put a little bit of cling film over the opening, as you can see coming out of the top of my lid. And that just protects the cap, because there's a big amount of air above it as the glue runs out as well. So rub the excess off on your hands, insert it into the back, and you can pinch down a little, how do we describe it? The section of the branch section of the acorn that's going to join onto the branch. You can also make that with a separate piece of paste that you add on as well. Oh yeah, you can use the top of your scribe tool as well. If you haven't got a piping nozzle to hand, just to do the circle around the point. I'm just making sure it's neatly fixed onto the wires, but it's really a great way of making it. If you think you've sort of softened the texture on the back as well, grab that nail brush and just neaten it off. So now I'm going to use that little homemade mould that I showed you earlier, and it's actually made with a 2-part putty called Silly Creations, but there's lots of brands out there, so depending on which country you're in, you just mix usually equal quantities of the 2 various mediums, and then when they're kneaded together it sets. So once you've loaded it inside the mould, I hollow it as you saw with a ball tool. You also need a shape. Now the back of my paintbrush was perfect because I need a smaller circle inside. I'm just showing the ladies that opposite me. And it's also good if you pinch the very centre with tweezers as well, because it just finishes it off. It looks like the acorn has fallen out and you've therefore pinched it with tweezers. Just like that. You can also see me gently pushing down with the tweezers pushed together as well. That's just to add some texture around the inside edge. So where the ball tool edged it. Make sure your side is smooth and watch how easily this pops out in a second. So easy, look at that. So now it's time to make the oak leaves. I'm rolling a sausage of paste, and this time I'm going to use multiple areas on the groove board. So what I've done, that sausage is going to be long enough to cover 2 or 3 of the veins, and I'm pressing it down onto the board. There we are, can you see 1, 2, 3? And then I press down and roll away. Now obviously you're going to prepare your board, whether it's Trex for edibles or Petal Base or Crisco, or if you're using cold porcelain you can use a cold cream like Nivea. But what it means is you can get that paste beautifully thin. I ease it away from the bottom because I don't use the very bottom. So that means I can ease it away there without worrying whether it's going to look untidy. So then you can see I'm going to move it out onto my board to start cutting. Yes, I know there's 2 there, but I've just shortened the clips for you a little bit. So I'm lining up my oak leaf cutter. So on this bit, you could see the ridge through the center and then just popping it out. Now, if you scrub the cutter firmly against the board, it gives you a really good clean cut. And then you can just use your finger to press through the hole. Different brands of cutters needs different methods. It's also a very good habit to get into, to scrunch up your paste and knead it into a really pliable ball again and pop it back into a sandwich bag. And you can also wrap the outside of the sandwich bag with a baby wipe or a wet cloth and double bag it, and that'll keep it for longer. Now I'm going to use 28 or 30 gauge wires for this, cut into quarters, and if you cut your wires at an angle, it gives you a really nice sharp point, which will make it so much easier to wire your leaf. So then all you need to do is to hold the shape firmly between finger and thumb, and then insert the pointed end of the wire. Now, I'm not using any glue on this particular one because the paste was very sticky, but you could use the high-tack Impex glue or PVA glue for the Hearty Soft Deluxe, or you can actually just use the edible glue when you're working in sugar. So go ahead and wire all of those, and then we need to soften the edges again. So using the ball tool, and I'm also paying particular attention to the very tip of the leaf to make sure there's no ridge left behind. And of course, it's not dragging it, it's rolling it. Now, when you put it in the veiner, be ever so careful to line it up. Just make sure it's lined up. You can also hold the wire with one hand while you press down as well. And it does pay to be careful because there's nothing worse than when it comes out crooked. Carefully peel them apart. It may mean that you need more corn flour on your veiner. And then turn your veiner face down and gently peel it away. So you can give it a little bit of shaping. And then you can sort of stand it up in a polystyrene container. You can hang the leaf upside down if it feels a bit too soft as well. So it depends on how the leaf feels at the time. So go ahead and vein the other one as well. So again, taking care to make sure that it sits in the recessed side and that the wire is right in the center. And for the smaller leaves, push it right to the top of the veiner as well. And it'll be a more appropriate veining. And you can even put them in your flower pad, although I know it's a bad practice. Right, so go ahead and make some more. So you're going to be making sure that you thin them and making sure that you get that leaf veined neatly in the center. And in the next part, we'll be doing all of the colouring. So I look forward to seeing you then. And any questions, don't forget to ask them below and I'll be more than happy to answer. Take care.